and these Democrats will rue the day. I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about tit for tat. You just wait, and it won't be Hunter Biden the next time.
I'm just telling you right now, President Biden should just be ready, because on January 20 of next year, when he's former President Joe Biden, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I am going to encourage all of my colleagues and everybody that I have any influence over as a member of Congress to aggressively go after the president and his entire family, his entire crime family, for all of the misdeeds that are out there right now related to this family.
In the aftermath of Donald Trump making history as the first former president to become a convicted felon, dozens of triggered MAGA Republicans began to issue public declarations of revenge and calls to action targeting President Biden and other Democrats, and we have to talk about it. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. All right, friends, this is some truly unhinged stuff from a genuinely unhinged and mentally ill party. MAGA Republicans of all stripes, Republican lawmakers, conservative commentators are frothing at the mouth in rage that Donald Trump was convicted by a jury of his peers in Manhattan on 34 counts of falsifying business records as part of a conspiracy to steal the 2016 election. Now, I'm going to play some clips here. We're actually going to start with the ones for whom we should have the highest standards, people like Ronnie Jackson, a Republican congressman, a former physician to both President Trump and President Obama. This is some unhinged stuff. This is him frothing at the mouth and calling for revenge on Newsmax.
Changed. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And, President Trump could have sicked his Justice Department on Hillary Clinton after he became president again for all of the illegal stuff that she had done. But he didn't. He moved on. He focused on what was good for our country, and he did the right thing for our country. I'm just telling you right now, President Biden should just be ready, because on January 20 of next year, when he's former President Joe Biden, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I am going to encourage all of my colleagues and everybody that I have any influence over as a member of Congress to aggressively go after the president and his entire family, his entire crime family, for all of the misdeeds that are out there right now related to this family.
Unhinged.
I am just disgusted. I'm quite frankly just pissed off about what happened yesterday. I'm not the only one. And you can look at the record number of fundraising that took place yesterday, small dollar donors. Those people, a lot of them have never voted before. They're all going to be voting this time, I promise you. And we are going to take this country back. Donald Trump is going to be president again, and we are going to get our country back.
So yeah, Donald Trump did enjoy a record-breaking fundraising night with small dollars, and good for him. He's been lagging behind substantially President Biden with respect to fundraising, but we don't know how this is going to turn out. We're not even 24 hours into Trump's criminal conviction. There's no telling how this will play out. I will say, of course, before we move on, that Ronnie Jackson, of course, shocker, because he's a MAGA Republican, he's a liar. Donald Trump did not take the moral high ground after publicly promising to incarcerate Secretary Hillary Clinton. As a matter of fact, he did attempt to pressure his Department of Justice to prosecute Hillary Clinton more than once during his administration. So MSNBC has been breaking down this claim. So to the extent that reality still has any meaning, let's review the receipts. In Trump's first year in the White House, after the 2016 election was over and Clinton largely withdrew from public view, the then president publicly pleaded with the Justice Department to go after Clinton. A year later, in 2018, the then president told the White House counsel that he wanted to order the Justice Department to prosecute Clinton. Ahead of Election Day 2020, nearly 4 years after Clinton's defeat, Trump again publicly called for the Democrats' incarceration and lobbied then Attorney General Barr to prosecute Clinton for reasons unknown. None of this was kept secret. It happened out in the open. We all saw it play out in public. And yet there was Trump on national television last night patting himself on the back for showing restraint, saying it would have been terrible and horrible if he targeted Clinton after the 2016 election and tried to have her prosecuted. The problem, of course, is that Trump targeted Clinton after the 2016 election and tried to have her prosecuted. It's not a matter of opinion. It's simply what happened, whether the Republican assumes we've forgotten or not. And again, it's not just Trump, but you also, again, have people like Ronnie Jackson as well spreading this falsehood, this blatant lie. But it's not just Ronnie Jackson. You have Republican Senator Marco Rubio saying, don't just get angry about this travesty, get even. And he has a link to a fundraiser. Republican Congressman Mike Collins says, time for red state attorneys general and district attorneys to get busy. And you will be stunned to learn, probably not, that he followed up with this tweet later and said Hillary Clinton should be targeted. Funny how that works. But it's not just MAGA Republican lawmakers. It's also MAGA Republican commentators, like Megyn Kelly, for example. She was very upset about the verdict. And there's a 2-minute and 50-second clip. I don't know how much we're going to play of it, but she's frothing at the mouth and says that Democrats will rue the day that they dare hold Donald Trump accountable for his crimes. So let's find out what she has to say.
This whole scheme, and here it is the proper word, is corrupt. It's a before and after moment for America. What just happened today is a line we can't uncross. And these Democrats will rue the day they decided to use lawfare to stop a presidential candidate. I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about tit for tat. You just wait, and it won't be Hunter Biden the next time. It's going to be Joe Biden. It could potentially still be Barack Obama. It could still potentially be Hillary Clinton. We're going to have to look at what the statutes of limitations are on the various crimes they surely committed. We're going to have to look at passing laws to revive those dead crimes, felonies or misdemeanors, so that those cases can be brought.
Yeah, and she goes on like this. Again, genuinely unhinged stuff, but entirely predictable because, of course, it's a cult. There's no timeline in the multiverse in which Megyn Kelly, Mike Collins, Ronnie Jackson, Marco Rubio, or any other MAGA Republican would accept Trump being held accountable for crimes. Again, the selective outrage, of course, is hilarious because Megyn Kelly was a political commentator and she didn't care at all that Donald Trump was publicly campaigning on jailing his opponents. President Biden didn't do that. President Obama didn't do that. Hillary Clinton didn't do that. Publicly campaigning on jailing his political opponents in 2016, in 2024 this year, and in 2020 as the sitting president, publicly pressuring Attorney General Bill Barr to go after Joe Biden, a political rival, Barack Obama, an ex-president, and Megyn Kelly loves to flirt with the idea that ex-presidents should be entitled to absolute immunity. She didn't believe that prior to 2024 or prior to Trump being prosecuted. She never believed that. She would never have tolerated that for President Obama, a Democrat, a black Democrat at that. He wore a tan suit once, and that's just the cardinal sin for Fox News alumni such as herself. But because it's Trump, well, maybe that presidential immunity thing makes sense. And don't go after political rivals unless it's Trump going after political rivals. No evidence whatsoever that any of these people would have objected if Trump had been successful in pressuring Barr. He tried to pressure Barr. He tried to pressure Jeff Sessions. He failed. Trump doesn't get credit for that. The fact that Trump tried to weaponize his Justice Department and failed in certain respects is not a reflection of his ethical stature or his competence. It means he's an unethical moron. But it's not even just right-wing commentators like Megyn Kelly. It's also reportedly and, purportedly respected constitutional conservatives and lawyers, people like John Yoo, who worked for President Bush, right? This is not a right-wing political commentator, although he is a frequent Fox News guest. But even he says, you know what? Maybe Republicans need to start going after Democrats.
So, John, you have a piece out today that you say this trial has already affected essentially the office of the presidency. And you suggest that there may need to be some pushing back, you say, from the other side of the aisle. But do you worry now that we've kind of crossed a line at which politics has always been difficult, but much more of a blood sport? And do you worry that our legal process is being pulled into that and the idea that both sides should consider using that as a weapon?
Yes, Shannon, I think for all of us Americans, it's not as important what happens to President Trump as a person. It's what's important is what happens to the presidency in our constitutional system. What does this mean for future presidents? And the weaker that these cases are, the weaker that Bragg's cases, the weaker that Merchan allows a case like this to go forward and get to the jury, the bigger the door is open for any DA in the future to bring charges against the president from the opposite party that they don't like. That kind of harassment of presidents is going to cause them to worry about their legal liability when what they should be doing is focusing on making the toughest decisions on behalf of the American people, on behalf of protecting the country. And so, yes, I really do worry. And I think that the only way to put a stop to this, sadly, is for some Republican DAs to prosecute Democratic office holders, Democratic executive branch officials, Hunter Biden, maybe even Joe Biden. That's the only way, I think, to put a stop to this. Otherwise, what we've seen is the crossing of a constitutional Rubicon where suing presidential predecessors is going to just be the norm.
So there you have it. I mean, just open calls for vengeance. Now, the reason I'm smiling is because, number one, I'm not surprised. And number two, I don't think that it should at all affect the outcome here, or that it should have affected the calculus or influenced the calculus of, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, Special Counsel Jack Smith, or Attorney General Merrick Garland. I don't think it should have weighed in at all. The other thing I want to point out is you get the Republican. This is how unhinged they are. You have former Republican Governor Larry Hogan, who's now running for Senate, I think in Maryland, if I'm not mistaken. And he says, regardless of the result, I urge all Americans to respect the verdict and the legal process at this dangerously divided moment in our history. All leaders, regardless of party, must not pour fuel on the fire with more toxic partisanship. So he's actually one of the few to not say, let's go after Biden and purge the Democrats. And in response, one of Donald Trump's campaign advisors says, you just ended your campaign. Folks, this is where we are. The Republican Party is a bad faith authoritarian cult of personality with no limiting principle and no talent for or interest in responsible governance. Republican elected officials are just morally inferior to Democratic elected officials. They're awful people. They have no interest in governance. And what they are interested in is supporting Donald Trump and putting him above the Constitution. That's all they care about. Even so-called moderates like Susan Collins, the Republican senator from Maine, the one who styles herself as a moderate, but she would always hesitate to go against Trump, to convict him in impeachments. I think he learned his lesson was her iconic line. And she came out and issued a statement recently decrying the decision and reinforcing her support for Trump. This is the party of law and order. They don't care about law and order. Again, it's just a fact. Law and order is something that they get to impose on the rest of us. Republicans can use law and order and impose law and order on people in blue cities, blue states, liberals, progressives, women, marginalized groups, minorities. They get to do that to us, right? But they themselves can't be held accountable for anything they do. It's the total asymmetry. And I think that, again, Attorney General Merrick Garland, although he was much too slow, for which I will blame him forever, but just the Justice Department in general pursuing January 6th insurrectionists and the co-conspirators to try to steal the election. And again, all the lawsuits across the country punishing Donald Trump and his acolytes as sycophants for trying to steal the election and doing so unlawfully. And all the district attorneys and attorneys general who have pursued Trump, I think they did the right thing. I think they were going to say, hey, listen, rule of law applies to everybody, including former presidents, including Donald Trump. And by the way, I'll remind you that the Department of Justice, President Biden's Department of Justice, is pursuing prosecution. They have prosecuted President Biden's own son. He had the power to call it off. He had the power to pardon Hunter Biden, and he has chosen to do neither. Biden's own Department of Justice put a special counsel, a Republican special counsel, to investigate Biden himself, President Biden himself. Two prominent Democratic lawmakers, including Bob Menendez, a Democratic senator of New Jersey, being prosecuted by Biden's Department of Justice. There's no evidence of rank partisanship in this Department of Justice. It's just what Republicans want you to believe, because again, they want Democrats to be punished all the time, perhaps for justifiable reasons, perhaps for other unjustifiable reasons, but they want Republicans to be cut a check to commit crime with impunity. That's the asymmetry. Republicans are hypocrites, and we should reject the hypocrisy. And to the extent that they will try to weaponize the Justice Department or anything against Democrats, they were always going to do that because it's a bad faith authoritarian cult of personality. And we'll see what happens. But let me know what you think in the comments.